being joined today by Michigan attorney John Lucas, who's going to discuss some of the basics of Michigan divorce law. Mr. Lucas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Michigan is called a no-fault divorce state. What exactly does the term no-fault divorce mean?
Well, no fault means that you no longer have to allege grounds for obtaining a divorce in Michigan. Most states have adopted the no fault divorce statute, which means you don't have to either allege or prove grounds for obtaining a divorce, such as mental cruelty, adultery, desertion. You can just allege there's been a breakdown of the marriage, and then you can obtain your divorce.
So is there a residency requirement stating when or where a person may file for divorce in Michigan?
Yes, there is. One of the parties has to reside in the state of Michigan for at least 6 months and in the county in which you're filing your divorce for 10 days. And if you've satisfied that requirement, or if your spouse has, then you can file for divorce in Michigan.
So if a person is served by their spouse with divorce papers, how long do they have to respond, and what's the next step after that?
Well, there's a period of 21 days in which the other party has to file a response or an answer to the complaint. And they should act promptly, because if they do not, a default can be entered against the party who hasn't responded. And then they will have a hard time doing anything in the divorce until they get that default set aside. And the other side may just be able to obtain the divorce without the other side's input whatsoever.
Oh, okay. You know, I've heard that there are certain court fees associated with filing for a divorce in Michigan. What are these fees?
Well, if the parties do not have minor children, it's $150. That's the filing fee with the court. If the parties do have minor children, it's $230. There are some other fees that will have to be paid later, such as motion fees, but those are the main fees that have to be paid to obtain a divorce.
Okay, so I understand that there's a waiting period before a Michigan divorce can be final. Is that true?
Well, yes, there is. If the parties have minor children, they have to wait 6 months before they can enter their divorce judgment. Now, what that means is the parties still have to file their papers in court, so a complaint still has to be filed in the court and an answer should be filed, but 6 months after the filing, the parties can try and work out their judgment on a consensual basis, and they can enter the judgment, but they do have to wait 6 months before they can do that. If they do not have minor children, the waiting period is 60 days.
In a Michigan divorce, how are homes, cars, and property divided, and who's responsible for making the mortgage, car, and utility payments?
Well, in many cases, the parties work out a property settlement among themselves in terms of how they divide the property. But if they do not come to an agreement, the court will make that division of property for them. And there are essentially two kinds of property. There's marital property and separate property. Marital property is property that's acquired during the marriage, and oftentimes that's divided on a 50-50 basis, but really the courts look at what is equitable and what is fair. If property is owned before the parties obtain their, before they become married, then that's considered separate property. And in many cases, the separate property will still remain separate and will not be divided between the parties.
Okay, so can a person collect alimony from their spouse in Michigan?
Well, yes, they can, but not in all cases. It depends on a number of factors. And the two main factors that I see that the courts look at are really the ability of the parties to earn an income and the length of marriage. And those two factors weigh very heavily in terms of whether or not alimony can be awarded, but it is not automatic.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Lucas. Due to our time limitations, we have to discuss child support and child custody with you in our next segment. But before we go, is there anything important that we've missed here that you'd like to say to our viewers who are considering filing for divorce?
Well, I would just encourage anyone to call me if you have any further questions, and I do have a free initial consultation.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.